Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Education is the Best Medicine. And thanks for watching, and happy weekend to everybody. It's a beautiful day in Oakland, in the Bay Area, Berkeley, my home. And I want to welcome you back. Um, my name is George Pearson. I'm a PA, and I've been a physician's assistant. I've been practicing for about, 35 years. My background's in internal medicine, family practice. I'm board certified. In fact, I'm recertifying in my board specialty, which is primary care. Um, I am still wearing masks. I think it's really important. You'll hear some stuff about it, but remember, we're here because we masked. Uh, and if masks aren't important, then why are hospitals still using them? I would think that you would want to get rid of a very albatross, but they're still using hospitals, they're still using respiratory care clinics, and that kind of thing. And some of the county places are talking about reinstituting mask mandates. So I think still it's a good idea. Um, and want to say again, welcome, and wanted to start the show with again I'm in a primary care adult medicine setting, and I see a lot of general follow ups for hospital discharges and walk-ins. And so I've been seeing a large amount of fractures, and I want to talk a little bit about that. And I just want to thank everyone for checking us out. September the 9th. Yeah, we've been quite busy, and again, been seeing a lot of fractures, a lot of blood pressure, a lot of and what I'm saying when I bring these things up, it's what I'm concerned about in the community in terms of injury and disease burden. Definitely the number one killer of women and men is uh, uncontrolled blood pressure. And I think that we are not. You're seeing some commercials about it, but not to the extent that we need to uh, make it happen. Um, and so it's always a constant. It's a vigilance, and I'm a believer in prevention. I'm a pro vaccine clinician. I take all my vaccines. The big ones right now are RSV, influenza, COVID, the new vaccines coming out, and I think that we should do that. Prevention is the key now. It's harder to get sick, and I tell people that yeah, 40 last year, 40,000 people got COVID. This year, only 10,000. But if you're 10,001 and you get sick and you develop long COVID, which I'm seeing a lot of now, then it's not very. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, in other words. And so, again, I've been seeing a lot of fractures lately, and it got me kind of thinking about uh, fracture incidents in particular, and some of it in these cases like motorized uh, vehicles, either the bikes or the skateboards, and incurring some really major injuries and disability, and because when you break a bone, it has to heal. First of all, it has to be treated properly in an orthopedic setting so that it gets the best chance to heal. And if there's changes, and we'll talk about that later, what happens in fractures is if not treated properly, can be very disabling to the individual. And it also got me thinking about Mr. McConnell, our Senate leader, and he has had some post-concussion syndromes. And again, falls are really traumatic for us as we age. I'm 68, and I did have a fall last few months ago, and man, I tell you, recovering from it was intense. That's why we have to stay active. We have to stay do our core strength issues, eat well, rest, you know, and if can exercise, keep moving. You have to keep moving. Weight's a real major issue too, in terms of diabetes and insulin resistance and elevated blood sugar. And what I try to tell folks now, it's not the disease, it's the condition. And so, elevated blood sugar, elevated blood levels, even if at not a point of treatment, cause the body dysregulation, and you just feel a little bit off. When your sugar's elevated, too high or too low. When there's elevated cholesterol, when there's blood pressure, and even though we think about blood pressure being a silent killer, I do see symptomatic issues with folks with blood pressure, headache, anxiety, pain syndromes, a host of things that you would not associate with elevated blood pressure, but you have to. And when the blood pressure is lower, these things kind of resolve themselves, including psychiatric illnesses too. And so we talking about falls and recently how dangerous they are in relationship to injury, and not just the injury but the post injury. And so, of course, to go to GPT chat, and it got me to thinking about asking a real basic question: what are the most common causes of fracture in the United States? And depending on factors such as age, gender, and activities, what are those factors and what are the concerns? Falls, number one. Falls are a leading cause of fractures, especially among the elderly. Fractures commonly occur in the hip, wrist, and spine as a result of those falls. And of course, with those kinds of fractures is, downtime, mobility, healing, rehabbing, you know, and depending on a bunch of very factors, getting back to where people were at baseline. And so it's a tough rehab, even for younger folks. Motor vehicle accidents causes car accidents, motorcycle accidents, and other motor vehicle collisions can lead to fractures, particularly in the bones and extremities of the ribs. And so these couple of things I've seen are, fractures of the arm, humerus, of the leg, um, pelvic fractures. And again, these are really hard injuries unless they're treated early and appropriately, um, because the rehab is extensive also. And so I bring this up because, again, motor vehicle accidents, these scooters, these electronic scooters, I'm not against them, but you should be wearing a helmet, you should be wearing pads, you should be doing not the, uh, you should be doing speed limit, you know. Anyway, just what I'm saying. And sports and recreational injuries, fractures, of course. But when I think about it, it got me thinking is Joe Theismann and had his leg broken. It's like, wow, man, this is a dangerous sport. Uh, so some of the sports related injuries and fractures, high impact sports like football, of course, basketball, soccer can lead to fractures of the limbs, while activities like skiing and snowboarding can cause fractures in various parts of the body. So common issues. Uh, a condition called osteoporosis. It's a condition characterized by weakened bones, making them more prone to fractures, particularly in the hip, spine, and wrist. The condition is more common in older adults, especially postmenopausal women. And I'm seeing to have to do a lot of examination. Osteoporosis is a common cause of bone destruction of bone architecture, and how it's diagnosed is called a DEXA scan. And within a certain number, if you fall within that number, it's based on a young white female. So if you fall within a certain number, and to the credit, I think they're starting to look at more the issue of DEXA scan and cultural issues between women of color um, that have characteristically not been diagnosed at an earlier date because the tests aren't ordered, because it's not a discussion. Uh, Women of color in the literature have uh, been spared osteoporosis, but I don't think that's true. And as we're living to an older age, osteoporosis becomes an issue of aging and not just genetics, gender, excuse me, and genetics. Workplace injuries, of course, certain professions or workplaces such as construction and manufacturing can have a higher rate of fractures. And I just think it's kind of important that we understand that, when you get an injury like a fracture and you think you can walk it off or let it not heal, you get to the ER and they say this is a fracture and it's your wrist, and you just, I ain't got time to go, and it's still hurting 3 or 4 months later, then that's a problem, because there is an issue in the literature and understanding is risk of sepsis and infection of that bone. And then with sepsis and infection of the bone, then the bone becomes harder to heal, therefore um, providing permanent disability. So our job in medicine is to limit, my job, I'm saying it now in this part of my career, is to keep you out of the hospital and have you live your best life, and to injury rehab as best possible to get back to your same quality of life. So if you were skating, you want to skate, and you fractured your ankle or whatever, you can get back to doing that. Well, of course, limitations, and you know, but you can do that. That's the key. And pathological conditions such as medical conditions such as bone tumors and infections can weaken bones and make them more susceptible to fractures. So again, some bone, some tumors of bones are benign, and some are deadly. And some of this stuff is fine incidentally on X-ray or an ultrasound for another condition or something, and they pick it up. And so just have it checked out and have it looked at, and if necessary, biopsied. But stay in touch. Just don't say, "Oh, it's a bone tumor." I'll be okay with it. Get out of here. It's not hurting you, but it doesn't have to hurt to be lethal. Child and adolescent injuries ended this discussion, and children and adolescents are susceptible to fractures. You know, yeah, they are babies, playing and running around and bumping their heads and bumping their ankles and stuff like that. And, just boy, they're resilient, but it's just sometimes it just happens that way. Anyway, like, and when they have fractures, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the bones are still growing, so they really need the direction of a pediatric or orthopedic specialist, and along with their great pediatrician. Anyway, and I want to put a shout out to those that are still working in medicine and have chosen to work in medicine throughout this really tough period post pandemic, and the aftermath, almost like HIV, big issue with infections, and now with the inception of heart and dual therapies and multiviral therapies, it's now a chronic illness. And kudos to all the scientists and all the folks that the clinicians that worked at that time. Those were some tough times, just like these were in terms of understanding COVID. Um, and so not only is it the fracture, but I wanted to find out what are you know the risk of morbidity, which is injury, recovery. What are the things that cause it, and even sometimes death with fractures. And so, getting back to GBT chat, great stuff. I'm loving it. It's getting, I review literature too in order to get ready for our discussions, and again, preparing for boards, and enjoying the review of literature. Uh, I'm a lifelong learner. That's what I was taught when I was at Stanford. Learning was lifelong. As they said that 1982. I was God, I just can't believe it, but that's what they said. Lifelong learning was so important, and wanted to kind of understand that learning is lifelong. In medicine, lifelong learning is required. And I have a degree in organizational behavior that says that it talks about systems change, and we are constantly in constant motion in terms of change, particularly in an organizational setting. And if you don't change, you'll be changed by the change. So, folks that are resistant to lifelong learning probably are resistant to change and probably are stuck. So, medicine doesn't allow that. So, if you're not going to do that, then people retire. And so, I'm starting to get that. Luckily, I still have a love of learning, and I hope that this translates to my grandchild, Kaylee, and a story about her later, but that's another discussion. So, fractures, while often treatable, can lead to various medical risks and complications, and they can result in mobility of health-related complications, and in some cases, more death. The major medical risks associated with fractures in the United States: infection. Again, I'm bringing this up because if you are in care for a fracture, you need to stay in care for that fracture, along with your primary care provider and the orthopedic surgeon, because until it's healed, and so the primary care can't do a series of x-rays and monitor the change in the bone from the time the bone was fractured until that point. That's what the orthopedic surgeon, the orthopedic specialist does in evaluating, treating the fracture. So a key component is needed, and then some of the changes, they can pick them up early. That's the key. Again, we are now practicing in a team approach, patient-centered care, in which our job, or the job of primary care, should be to encircle you with all those specialists that need to evaluate this injury and get you back to your best life. And so, particularly open fractures are a risk of serious infection. So those have to be monitored with antibiotics, as well as, again, you know, reduction and reattaching of the bone. And sometimes you need pins, sometimes you need rods. Sometimes there's it's just, it could be a very extensive issue, and that's what this rehab for some of the folks I'm taking care of is going to be. Compartmental syndrome. Let me talk about that. It's a condition with the pressure within the muscles and soft tissues around the fracture site increase, potentially cutting off blood supply to the area. It's almost like everything starts to squeeze around that area, and instead of providing nutrients and blood flow and healing to it, it becomes a prevention. And so, usually, it has to be seen by the surgeon to have the compression resolved. And again, this is why the follow-ups for orthopedic injuries are important, because they're engaging for that, bone emergency, or compartmental syndrome. And it's a thing that, again, if it needs to be evaluated and be acted on, it needs to be acted on immediately. You can't wait. What will happen if you don't? You can lose the functionality of the bone. You can use the ability to use it in the way you did, maybe running, maybe tennis, maybe hammering, that kind of thing. And the other issue with fractures is non-union. Some fractures um, don't come together, and this is where the orthopedic surgeon is key. An orthopedic surgeon has to basically straighten the bone out and reattach it if possible, and add a rod on it if possible, so that it can stay informed, and then lays the rod on the bone and do what surgeons do. He attaches it, and it hopefully keeps that bone together to heal. Um, but they don't always remove the steel rods. I have seen patients with those rods, and particularly in the rods in the leg and the feet, have them for 15, 20 years. And so the major concern is appliance failure. and so they need to be evaluated by the orthopedic surgeon every couple of years to make sure that the appliance in there, wherever it's at, isn't failing to a point that it needs to be removed. And usually, that's a real discussion between the orthopedic surgeon and the client about what that's going to mean. Um, and there's malunion. Even with the best of care, sometimes they don't heal properly, and so um, it's required that maybe it has to be another surgery or maybe a reevaluation to see what other options are in terms of if it's healing in a manner that isn't uniform with how the joint originally looked and functioned. In other words, a straight leg, as opposed to one that's crooked. Um, and so again, the issues are pain, deformity, and functional limitations, which is what we want to prevent. Early, often treatment, really following the orders of with the orthopedic surgeon, and that kind of thing. And of course, pain's involved, and so that's a real again patient-centered approach. I have to say that the reduction in opiate use is here, and so usually folks for these kinds of fractures are going to be medicated the first week, and after that, maybe every other week, and then they will stop them and move someone to, unless there's a contraindication, ibuprofen, even Tylenol is what's going on now. So again, and also we can have in this fracture complication picture, um, deep vein thrombosis, which is the vessel becomes inflamed and not delivering blood back and forth, and you have clots, and it can be a risk of those clots traveling up the individual's leg to the lungs or to the heart or even sometimes the brain. So it's something that needs to be evaluated. Usually use blood thinners to or until the bone is healed, and even a little after, so to ensure there's no clotting done. Risk of pneumonia, and again because of immobility, particularly in the elderly, but I've seen it in younger folk too. Um, and it's again, this is some of the secondary complications of a fracture, in terms of how the a fracture can affect lung health, can possibly the cough and uh, almost asthmatic appearance, but really coughing productive sputum, usually greenish, but not necessarily. Some people don't cough up a lot of sputum, uh, particularly in my age range over 65. Um, More fatigue, again, uh, get chest x-ray, treat with a or antibiotic, and IV x-ray because I'm just concerned about consolidation and it not resolving because that's what you see on the x-ray. Pressure sores from these kinds of fracture, bed sores from laying on extended period of time, particularly heel and sometimes the leg and sometimes the hip. Again, they become painful and prone to infections. So all these things are a cascade of infection due to altered and compromised immune systems, particularly in the elderly. Osteoporosis, again, the chronic issue of fractures is arthritis and nerve and vessel damage. Uh, and again, the risk and complications of surgery. Again, these are all things that happen with fractures. It behooves you to be kind of careful. Um, and I'm not against risky living. I'm just serious against living this risky. And unfortunately, there's a lot of death due to fractures. It's relatively common, but it can occur in severe trauma, particularly in older adults. And we have who have underlying healthcare conditions. Hip fractures in the elderly, for example, are associated with an increased risk of mortality, often due to complications like pneumonia, deep vein thrombosis, and other medical issues. And as this discussion goes, you should promptly seek medical attention for fractures, follow recommended treatment plans, and take preventive measures to minimize the risk of complications and ensure the best possible outcome. Proper care and rehab are crucial to reducing the morbidity and improving the quality of life for individuals who have experienced fractures. And with that, I get a chance to change things up. And I'm talking about the weather, just aside, who can deny climate change or warming the environment is destroying, changing our lives and the quality of our lives as we speak. It happened, and it's happening, and it's going to happen this generation. We're responsible, we're the caretakers of this uh, uh, earth, and we're not doing a good job. I want to do a special shout out to the families in Morocco and the dealing with this major earthquake that has killed over 300 people. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family uh, of those folks. And the issue looks like was adobe brick housing, which would not withstand an earthquake. Some of it's very beautiful, but it would not withstand an earthquake. And so, again, one of the issues around climate change. Uh, and I think President Biden acknowledged that. I even think ex-President Trump acknowledged that. He didn't like it, but he acknowledged it. Uh, and for some of them to say that President Biden's too old, well, I think that wisdom comes at a price, aging. And and then it got me to thinking about, again, this question of climate change and why is it whether or not taking such an adverse change. And I went to, again, send my condolences to the families in Morocco with this major earthquake. Um, and yeah, I love my lawn. And yeah, um, what water I save for everything else goes on my lawn. Uh, I'm very traditional. My father and my stepfather both had lawns, so and I've had to let it go brown, during this time. But uh, that's a homage to them. Uh, my dad loved the lawn. My stepdad loved the lawn, and they kept them until they couldn't do them anymore. And so that's what it is. And we got to think about, conserving. Uh, the future is electric cars and solar to make us less energy dependent. It's unfortunate that people don't understand that the whole economic cycle of oil and what it costs in a barrel and how has so much of impact on our economy. Imagine if we could take oil out of the equation in terms of driving your car, how much money would you save? Or heating your home, what would that save? So we have to think differently now because that natural resource is shrinking, and those that own it are making us pay a high price for it. It has nothing to do with anything else but the economics. Saudi Arabia and Russia own oil, are two, I guess, enemies. I have to say enemies. So, you have to really watch a person that would cut off food to a world. Putin's cut off the wheat to the world. Hmm. Okay. Hey, didn't he and Trump have a whole? Anyway, I'll go with that. And so I had to ask the question: what is the major contributor to climate change in the U.S.? Again, I'm in the United States, and I understand the world, but what's going on in this? Because here's my discussion: if the impact is on the community, excuse me, the impact on the world, what on the community of people of color, we're impacted 3 to 4 times to a higher rate of this. In other words, when they say when the white community has the cold, the people of color have pneumonia. And so I was kind of wanting to understand. So major contributors says that many parts of the world. It says that the major contributor to climate change in the United States, as in many parts of the world, is the emission of greenhouse gases. primary carbon dioxide, methane, CH4, and nitrous oxide. So all these things just raise the temperature of the planet, thereby, we're burning ourselves up basically. These emissions are largely the result of human activities, with multiple sectors contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. In the U.S., the largest contributors inside is energy production. The burning of fossil fuels for electricity and heat production is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. This includes the use of coal, natural gas, oil, and power plants in industrial facilities. That's why solar. That's why Biden has put this program out in terms of us moving to solar. We have to. Yeah. I'm going to miss my gas car, but things got to change. If you don't change, you be changed by the change. Transportation sector, including cars, trucks, airplanes. Here's a theme here, right? You get the gas and you burn it in your house, and then you burn in your car. So quite naturally, that's the number 2 cause of all these hot gases in our country and society. And yeah, I drive a convertible Miata. That's gas. That is really expensive gas too. But for years, I drove a truck and a Volkswagen and carried my baby around in them because that's all I could afford. And I can't afford this, but I want to do something for me. So treat yourself sometime. The transportation sector, including cars, trucks, airplanes, and ships, is a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions. This is primarily due to the combustion of gasoline and diesel fuels. Industrial processes, the various industrial processes such as the production of cement, chemicals, metals, release greenhouse gas. So all the things in this society that really make money, they produce a lot of greenhouse gas. And that should be the discussion. How can we make these um, industries cleaner without decimating them, without destroying them? That's the scientific question. That's the question. That's the political question. If you don't change, you be changed by the change. My student loan is coming up too. Hey, that's how it is. Um, and what I mean by that is that I'm a community provider and I make less money than if I were in the private sector. But the joy and the riches I've had from working in the public sector have well been worth the less money that I made in terms of a knowledge base, in terms of understanding folks, and then being a part of a communities, uh, dealing with a population that some would shun, but I enjoy and embrace, and they embrace me back. I learn from them, they learn from me. Again, shared decision making, patient-centered care. Um, and okay, agriculture. I heard somewhere where the cow uh, gas was one of the major contributors of CO2. Here's what it says: agricultural practices include enteric fermentation, methane emissions from livestock, gas, right? Rice cultivation, the use of synthetic fertilizers contribute to methane and nitrous oxide emissions. Land use and forestry. Changes in the land use, including deforestation and urbanization, can release stored carbon into the atmosphere. However, afforestation and reforestation efforts can act as carbon sinks by absorbing CO2. So here's the twist in the team that we need to have a balanced program for uh, thinning our forests and thinning our forests the way the Native Americans do it. They have controlled burns in their communities and in their farmland. Something that's been being looked at overall. Got to congratulate Governor Newsom for signing the new Housing Act. I think it's going to provide some new housing in communities across the state of California, which is what is needed. We're all here. Um, and waste management, it just doesn't get any better than that, right? Waste management, landfills produce methane emissions as organic waste decomposes without oxygen. Waste incineration can also release greenhouse gases. And one of the real issues around that was we had a lot of our servicemen exposed to the gas burning pits. And when I was doing some clinical work for the military, saw a lot of those folks coming back and talking about these gas pits were burning like 24 hours. And I was really kind of amazed that that would happen. Um, and I think that we have to kind of understand that we could be our own worst benefit or our own worst enemy. And so we have to kind of keep it moving. Martin Luther King said that in his last speech before he was murdered. So what GPT Chat said is that it's important to note that the exact contribution of each sector can vary over time, and that they depend on various factors, including policy measures, technical advances, economic conditions. Efforts to mitigate change in the U.S. include transition to cleaner and more sustainable energy sources, improving energy efficiency, promoting public transportation and electric vehicles, and reducing deforestation and implementing agricultural practices that minimize emissions. Additionally, various state and federal regulations are in place to address greenhouse gas emissions and promote climate action, which brings me to a discussion about this individual slash father slash son slash domestic violence slash murderer. He stabbed the mother of his children 34 times in front of his children. Um, he was sentenced to life imprisonment and was going to be transferred slash escaped in this hunt for this young man. And why I brought this up is that, it says Dan Clavetta escaped PAMA escaped prison by climbing wall over razor wire. I bring this up because it's sensationalism. And it's, again, a focus on this unseen enemy, us, men of color. And I must admit that when I worked in corrections, the discussion was a lot, and the prevailing thoughts that I only worked there 8 hours, but the individuals that were incarcerated, including my son, have 24 hours to think about how to escape. But in reality, is that true? Is the uh is Mr. Cavalier more the rule than the exception? Are we having people escape every other day out of these institutions, filling our communities with people that are, going to ravage and enter our houses and all that kind of stuff? Well, this was taken from the Statistical Research Department, June 2nd, 2023. Number of escapees from prisons in the U.S. 2000 to 2019. It says that from 2019, 2,031 inmates escaped from the state or federal prisons in the United States. This is a decrease from the previous year when 2,351 prisoners escaped from facilities across the United States. Ironically, it is the so-called land of the free that houses the highest prison population per capita in these United States, and with races that have long been more than double that of their closest developmental counterparts. Questions are constantly raised about domestically and internationally why the prison population is so high. This is not a new state of affairs, with the prison population of the United States hovering around 1.5 million people mark since the turn of the millennium. And I was thinking it was like 2.5 million, but this is earlier data. The second, piece is reported violent crime rate in U.S. from 1990 to 2021. In 2021, the violent crime rate in the United States was 395.7 per 100,000 of the population. Even though the violent crime rate has been decreased since 1990, the United States is the ranking a country with the most prisoners. Again, sensationalism. Again, a particular issue. When I worked in the Bureau of Prisons, I don't know how can anyone can escape. You have to go through so many things, so many checks. They just fired one of the guys on his watch. What can you do? Again, he got 24 hours to think about to escape. I'm there for an 8-hour shift. Report of violent crime in the United States. My point is a lot of hype around crime in America and the hyperbole regards to how safe we are. And the data shows that, if anything, although crime is decreasing, we still house the most number of prisoners in the United States in the world. We lead the world in incarcerating people in this so-called industrial, in the so-called school to prison industrial complex. In other words, our schools produce the next group of prisoners in the community, because that's the plan. That's why there's such a discussion around public education, because public education, again, what's American? Public education is as American as you can get, because it brings a whole group of people that would not have come together to learn together, to graduate together. Look at the diaspora of public schools. Look at their classes. That's America. And I bring this up because of the murder of my great-grandchild, Jamie, and the conscience left behind in our lives, in my great-grandchild's life. But the hope is left behind too. I want to also announce to my grandchild, who's the love of my life. And although my grandchildren are scattered around the country, they need to know that I love them, and will be there for them, and I always have a plan for them. I was telling a story. I have so many passwords, and I was having some problems remembering these passwords. So I gotta do something. So I phonetically used Kaylee's. Her name is spelled K-I-L-E-Y. K-I-L-E-Y. And but I phonetically used it for my password. I can't forget it. So every time I log into my work computer, if I'm having a real kind of intense day where everything is happening, when I log into my computer, her name pops up, and then I think about why I'm there and what I'm doing, how I can get more focused, because she needs me to be the best person I can be. That's what grandkids do. I know she didn't know that, but I'm telling her. And I guess it's important for me because that's how we keep dreams and hopes alive. And I want to thank her grandparents, Tracy and her hubby, doing an awesome job with my grandchild. And her husband's a minister, and just one of those individuals that's one of the warriors I consider in the community. And him and folks like Larry Austin, and they are really, really men of God, and doing God's work in a way that you just really can't imagine. And it brought me to a discussion about what is American. What's American? What is being an American in 2023? And I asked GBT chat, what was an American? Because I'm going to close it out with a few things. Being an American in 2023 as any other year, encompasses a complex and multifaceted identity shaped by a variety of factors, including culture, history, values, and individual experiences. While GBT says, I can't provide a definitive answer to the concept of American identity, can we greatly it can vary greatly among individuals. Here are some key aspects that often define what it means to be American in 2023. Citizenship. Being American typically involves holding U.S. citizenship, which grants individuals right to certain number of rights and responsibilities, including the right to vote and the obligation to pay taxes. Diverse heritage. The United States is known as a melting pot of cultures, and many Americans have diverse ethnic, racial, and cultural backgrounds. Embracing this diversity and celebrating is a part of one's identity is important to many Americans. Diverse heritage. The United States is known as a melting pot. Civic engagement. Active participation in civic life, including voting, community involvement, and political engagement, is often a fundamental aspect of being an American. Civic life, including voting, community involvement, political engagement, is often seen as a fundamental aspect of being American. Freedom and democracy. Americans often value the principles of freedom, democracy, and individual rights and core components of their identity. Their values are enshrined in the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. And remember, in the U.S. Constitution, Africans in America were three-quarters of a human being. That's our place in the Constitution. I won't ever let people forget that. How could you equate a person, a human being, a value? That's when you don't think they're human. Patriotism, love for one's country, and a sense of patriotism, often important aspects of American identity for many people. Can it manifest itself in such as displaying the American flag, participating in patriotic events, and honoring veterans? Economic opportunity, the benefit in the American dream, which includes the idea of achieving success and prosperity through the hard work and determination, continues to be the significant aspect of American identity. So, understand in my mind then if immigration is an issue, if people that want to come to these shores and be a better American is limited because they want to come to these shores, then we are not truly Americans. Constitutional rights. Americans often hold their constitutional rights such as freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and the right to bear arms in high regard and they view these as integral to their identity. Cultural influences. American culture, including music, film, literature, and sports, plays a significant role in shaping the identity of Americans, and many people around the world are influenced by American pop culture. Regional identity. The United States is a vast, diverse country, and regional identity can be a strong component of being American. People are often identified with the culture, traditions, and values of their specific region. Adaptability and resilience. Americans have a history of being facing challenges and adapting to change. Wow. Resilience is in the face of adversity is often seen as a defining characteristic. It's important to note that American identity is not monolithic, and people experiences and perspectives can be very widely. What it means to be American 2023 may differ significantly from one person to another, reflecting the country's ongoing evolution and individuals' unique background beliefs. So that's a great definition. Um, so with great anticipation, I watched the American judicial system and the determination of responsibility. And this in regard to Mark Meadows and then ex-President Donald Trump. So the question that I had to ask in my mind is if indeed he is an American, he defines himself as this is an American fashion, then let's get back to this. I've always said the truth can be a line and lie can be truth. And so the criminal justice system, one for the rich, one for the poor, one for people, and one for particularly people of color, particularly African American, one for white male and female, and particularly for white male, and particularly when we talk about the first 10 presidents, who I will agree were great men, but they were also slave owners and involved in supporting an institution that had ramifications for African Americans since 1690. And if you're not clear about that, go review the reparation paper of California as they decide about reparations in California. Again, I'm not about reparations, but I am about history. Uh, and so the ruling came down, and it came down with a 42-page discussion about why it was made. And what did it say? Basically, it says, from my understanding, that he could not use the cover of his position as chief of staff to overturn a free and fair election in the state of Georgia and other places where he tried to do this, or create a fake set of electors to replace those that were going to give Biden, not give him, he earned that victory. So I was kind of in shock because my understanding that he was going to be able to be transferred to the federal system where they would probably just missed it and he would have walked away. And I think that what I want to bring up is that they kind of tried to play Miss Willis. They tried to play a black woman. They've been trying to play a black woman since 1619, African American. They are very disrespectful. She's an accomplished lawyer. She was elected by the state of Georgia to be their attorney general, to be the district attorney. She was elected to provide the laws and the enforcement of those laws without favor or color. That's an American. Versus Mr. Meadows and ex-President Trump. All those things I did, can you really say that true Americans would try to overthrow the government or, lead a Capitol riot or any of that? Is that truly American? And want to use the cover of the government to evade the law, to enter into state business, federal business. The whole concept of these United States was separation of church, of state, of three branches of government, separate but equal. And this very, very intelligent and honest and ethical black female, African American, standing her ground. And I just don't understand why they don't want to follow their own laws. See, it's supposed to be different. She's supposed to have a different outcome for them. She's supposed to be whiny. I want to thank Believe Radio, 24-hour inspirational gospel music station. I want to thank Amology. Curtis, thanks for all his support and helping me put this show together. Thank all the folks in the community watch and support and follow the page. And I'm trying to do more with that social media stuff and trying to make sure we stay on point. And I just think that we have to kind of reset ourselves and understand what it is to be American. And an American sometimes isn't always popular. She is not popular. I had the thing on my page that, pray for Miss Willis, of course, and all that she is and all she hopes to be, and pray for her safety. Because this whole concept about selling things with violence, and I want to give a special shout out to that young black woman that went to Kroger's and stole something. Yeah, she stole something. She went back to her car. And then she tried to hit a policeman. Okay, but you shoot her. She was pregnant. 2 children now without a mother. African American man in San Francisco. Obviously, some challenges that he had. pulls out a knife and says, "I just want to be left alone." And as he's walking away, they shoot him. We're like target practice sometimes because no one's thinking. What about taser? What about mitigation? What about just letting him walk away? Anyway, I am kind of still trying to wrap my head around this decision, and we'll see how it plays out. Um, I want to thank everybody that's been on this journey with me. Um, I didn't wake up saying, "Yeah, I want to be a PA," and that's good. A lot of my classmates did. I was just trying to take care of my son. I had to take care of my baby, and that was my motivator to all this. And I thank him too. Uh, Nothing's perfect. I'm not perfect, and I never have been. I'll never will be. I'll be the best that I can with what I have. Be honest, not take anything from anyone, not abuse anybody. Um, and it got me kind of thinking about, my practice style. And I tend to, and my model is a patient-centered care model. And I also included shared decision making. I think it's so important that people have a power to make the decisions about their body, about where they live, all that. So I don't ever make a decision without the agreement and understanding of what needs to happen. And if my clients don't think that's what needs to happen, then we don't do it. As much as I think it'd be important, much as I thought was important to do, I won't do it. It's important to have empathy and understanding, to listen, to listen, to understand from that person's point of view what it means to them in this time. It's a very vulnerable time, whether it's a diagnosis of diabetes or a fracture or understanding the pending death of a loved one, and what that means. And that means that challenge and change and navigating that challenge and change because it's just a change. And as long as you have breath in your body and your belief in yourself as you, then we continue, as Martin Luther King would say, to keep it moving. It's been a great hour. I want to thank and guest next couple weeks, good friend of mine, Danny Cotton. He's doing some real supreme work in um, corrections and recidivism and you know bringing folks back. We talked about Kenyatta. Well, we got to talk, so he's going to come on and got young brother um, who's a film and movie videographer. Um, and he's been doing it for a number of years. And he wants me to preview one of his pieces of work. And I would like to say thank you to everybody. I would like to say that my final thoughts are Africa was first. The first physician in Hotep, who was married to I didn't know, a very beautiful African queen. He was our first physician. The Greeks came to him to learn medicine. They also came uh, to Africa to find out in terms of Plato and Socrates, They learn from African scholars. So if that's being woke, so much I'm woke. Yeah, I want to reach out to these brothers who handed me some information on the Quran. Uh, interesting piece. Maybe get a chance to talk about it, but it's all good. Well, thank you for tuning in. It is now 3 o'clock. Please have a great weekend. Be safe. Be powerful. Take care of yourself. Love yourself. If you can't love yourself, can't love anyone else. So take care of you. Be you. Uh, get some exercise. Do some plant based stuff. Cut back on the meat. Cut back on the sugar. Love yourself. And thanks for tuning in to Education Best Medicine. We'll see you in a week and a half. Bye.